So the third is all competitors react. Now this is a tough one to go through now when I was kind of prepping this, because we spend 3 full days at 3 hours, 9 hours on this principle. And we're going to do it with 12 slides. Because it gets into branding, it gets into relationship marketing, it gets into innovative products, how to launch innovative products. You just can't do all those at once. We'll have some of those broken out in later sessions, but I'm going to give the big framework to understand it. First, let's say, do you believe this? Competitors are always copying successful strategies and trying to innovate new ones. Only one firm remains, right now, if you look at the Dow 30 firms, there's only one firm still there. They judge firms. Once they crash, you know, Kodak isn't really much of a player anymore in the world, so they're not there anymore. You know what firm's still there? No? GE. Do you think if GE was still making industrial switching equipment and light bulbs, they'd be in the Dow today? No. They have gone through 3 waves, and it's a very interesting story. I mean, very enlightening management structure. No matter how good you are, you don't stay. If you think of cell phone hands, Motorola one time had a cool handset called the Razr. Gone. Nokia one time had the top handset. It's gone. You know, Apple was smart. They're not hanging their hooks just on the best handset. Samsung probably has arguably had a better handset for a period of time. They made it sticky with the ecosystem on the software, on the content. I think we're going to see that more in the future. But anyway, given enough money and time, most strategies can be copied. Thus, you need to build a barrier to being copied. And that's the whole thing here is all customers react, so you need to build a sustainable competitive advantage. There's 3 things, and then we call this sustainable competitive advantage. We call it, you know, that's the barrier. In some cases, it's the essence of your firm's strategy. It must meet 3 conditions. Customers have to care. You have to do it well, better than your competitors. It's hard to have it as a competitive advantage if it isn't there. And it has to be hard to duplicate. And the third one is what people match. And I do this with a lot of small businesses. They say, man, we're making a lot of money. What a great business. I'm saying, if I had 10 million bucks and I wanted to do what you're doing, what would stop me? You wouldn't know how. Okay, you're the boss. Is he an owner? No, I hired him. How much you pay? 100? I'll pay him 300. Okay, now, could we do it? Oh, geez, he's a pretty key guy. Yeah, he could do it. Okay, I mean, what's the boundary? Typically, it's you're first, you're small, nobody really cares. But you get big enough and good enough, somebody's going to care. You start eating into their lunch a little bit, they're going to be after you. And when they go put it, if you want to get into business quick, they rip off 2 or 3 of your good people. Any kind of service business. And you think you have all these trade secrets and barriers, and you can't even keep them even if they want to stay, because to match them on the salary, you just can't cover it. You can't cover it. So you have to build it. So what are the ways you do it? We're going to go through, here's again all the stuff, lots of stuff here. We want to talk about SCA. The biggest thing I want to talk about is this BOR, this brand offering and relationship. Those are your market-based sustainable competitive advantage. Those are your levers to do it. I want to make sure you get that. Some of these other things we can't quite all go through. There just isn't enough time. There's one I'm going to mention is conjoint analysis. It's the third big analysis. Cluster, choice, and conjoint. What does conjoint do? Just conceptually. You're buying a car. You might evaluate 50 attributes on that car. And I'm, as an engineer, I have to design a car, and I have to balance all those attributes. If you want it to go faster, it costs me more money and weighs the car more and gets less gas mileage. You want it to be bigger, it has less gas mileage, it doesn't look as sporty. All these trade-offs. Come to find, conjoint is a method that converts all those variables into one unit and allows you to do trade-offs. So I can say, how much is 3 extra miles per gallon worth on a price point? And I can say, that for your target market, that's worth $1,000 on price, on the sticker price. I can make those conversions between unlike units. And it does it as one system. It was actually invented in the auto industry, but very powerful way. So a lot of people use this for understanding the trade-offs in their design decisions, even just pricing. But again, we're not going to necessarily go through that. What we're going to talk about are these frameworks and processes for thinking about it. But no, there are some tools. And any of these you're interested in, you can talk offline or you can just Google it, and there's plenty of information out there on, at least you'll know where to look. Okay, sources of SCA, brands, no surprise. It's one of the best ways, one of the big ways we spend a lot of money to build brands around our products. More effective for consumer goods, like a beer, a soft drink, because there's lots of people. So I can do big advertisements on Super Bowl and hit them all. Hard to differentiate though much, isn't it? Because everybody at the Super Bowl is watching kind of the same thing. Offering is the next thing. Those are, we spend R&D, new products, new technologies. Can it be innovative? Can it be low cost? Maybe you add some services with it. The third way is you can build relationships. And normally they go in this sequence. Relationships are normally used in the B2B space a little more because you can put FaceTime, you can put people together. Even those Starbucks relationships. People will walk by one Starbucks, same exact product, to go to a Starbucks 2 blocks down the road for a relationship. You know what that relationship is? It's a head nod. I recognize you, and maybe I'll remember your order. That's the relationship. We're very much relational beings, so it works very powerful. Actually, I'm going to pass around a couple books. This is actually a book by me, and that's why I'm passing it around. But it's on relationship marketing. This is one of the areas that if somebody is really interested in this, I'm very interested in doing research in this area. And what that means is we'll do a lot of work for nothing in order to get data and study it. So if it's in that area, we kind of go do that. But anyway, so those are 3 tools you have as a marketer to build sustainable competitive advantage. You can build brands, you can change your offering, build offerings and services, and you can build relationships. And they all work, I don't want to say equally well, they work different, but they can be a source of sustainable competitive advantage. And that's where we get the BOR from, right? Okay, and this customer equity perspective is a pretty interesting one. It's a way I want you to think of marketing and how and you can use it as a tool to convince your CFO to spend money on marketing. So the premise is customers are considered a financial asset. Now let's think about this. If you look at a balance sheet and a cash and an income statement, 2 of the things that all the accountants will spend a lot of time on. Let's say I'm Intel, and this is roughly a true story, and I'm going to spend $1 billion, now it's higher, but I'm going to spend $1 billion on a new fab to make silicon semiconductors. So I spend that $1 billion, I spend that money. Where does that money go? Does it disappear? No, you put an asset on the balance sheet. And over time, you depreciate the asset. But let's say I'm a marketer, so that's what the operations guy comes in and says, I want to build a new factory, $1 billion. So the accountant thinks of it and says, okay. I walk in as a marketer and I want to spend $1 billion on advertising Intel. Now he says, okay, I spend $1 billion, it goes to my income statement, and next year it's gone. At least in the plant, I have a nice building and a piece of property and it's getting depreciated. It just moves. When we spend money in marketing, it looks to the financial community and the accounting as it's gone. 1 year, it's an expense. Now, do you think at the end of each year, Coke's brand goes away and they start over building a new brand? Absolutely not. And when you buy a company, you often pay more than it's worth on the buildings because you pay goodwill and that's how much the brand's worth, and very often it's way more than the equipment, but that's how they think of it. We argue, and there's a whole push in this area in marketing, that you should think of customers as an asset. And when you're building brand value, you should show it. You should not have it wash away. Why do accountants, maybe there's some here, why don't they like that approach? It's not because they don't understand the logic of it. They don't like it for really one major reason. They can't count it. So we're doing it not because it isn't the right way for business. They agree it's the right way for business. They do it because it doesn't fit a nice rigorous process for accounting it, for putting it on the paperwork and making things. So they don't do it. So we have to do a way of thinking of it. So why bother? I argue, why bother with this customer-centric accounting? We're going to talk more about it. Primary driver of sales and profits. These are primary sources of competitive advantage. And it also captures and this is the most important for me, captures the long-term impact of marketing. Intel spent in their Intel Inside. Everybody know what Intel Inside means? You know, if you look at a computer, maybe not a Mac, but maybe a Dell or something, there'll be a little sticker there and it'll say there's a Intel microprocessor inside. Do you really care? Do you know what kind of memory? Who made your memory? No. Do you know who made the printed circuit board? No, but you know who made the microprocessor. They spent $1 billion to build brand equity at the consumer level. Why? Because there was only 7 companies in the world buying microprocessors. When you negotiate price, and there's only 7 customers, how good can you negotiate price? That's tough. They say, I buy a lot, I'm going to go to AMD, even though their product wasn't as good as it. AMD's was maybe not of the same caliber in some cases. They said, if we can build a brand to the end customer, then we can take away your negotiating power. And that's really why they did it. But so we need to understand how to measure that. And this is how we're going to do it. We call it the customer equity stack. And we're going to use an alcohol example because I found my students remember things better with alcohol examples. So we're going to start with an offering. Let's say I had a beer. The beer's in a paper sack. And I'm going to pick on Marty. I'm going to stop picking on Derek. He'll have a complex by the end of the day. So Marty, I walk over to Marty. He's been in one of my previous classes. So I had Marty, how much will you pay for this beer in a paper sack? So I let him taste it. He doesn't know who makes it. He knows anything. He just has taste. And what? How much you give me for this beer? It's the end of the day. Man, kind of tight. Okay, $2.50 for the beer. That's price versus performance. That's how much the product's worth. Now I take the paper sack off, and I can see it. It's a Heineken. And I go back. Now you say, well, he knows it's the same beer or anything, but we could do it with similar people and all. And I say, now how much will you pay for this beer now that you know it's an import? It's a Heineken. That's kind of maybe a higher class beer or something. And you'd say, oh, I'll pay $5 for that. That extra $2.50 that you paid is what the brand's worth. That's the brand equity, right? You're paying. If I did Tiffany, the diamond's worth something, 3 C's, we could figure out what it's worth. That turquoise bag doubles or triples the price, above the offering. It's worth a lot. I think I'm going to get into business just selling the bags. You know, you could buy the jewelry anywhere and just stuff it in a Tiffany box in a Tiffany bag. But now we're going to look at it, and let's say Marty could go down to his favorite bar with his favorite bartender across the bar, and he could drink that same Heineken. So same offering, same brand, but now he has a little relationship with the bartender. Won't go any far into the relationship, but he has a relationship with the bartender. How much will Marty pay for that beer now? Well, you could probably pay, in some bars, you pay $10. That's your relationship equity. That's your relationship. So you stack those up. And that's going together. We're doing it in price because that's one way to think about it. You could also think about it a competitor. How much better would that beer have to taste in order for Marty to leave his favorite bartender to go down the street to a different bar and get a different beer? I'd say the beer could probably be warm and terrible, and he might stay with the same bartender. In some products, we've shown that happens. That it turns out the service provider is more important than the product. In the financial services industry, there's times where a financial service advisor will leave because people, you build trust or relationship, and their customers will follow them even though there might be some cost involved in doing it. That's the overall value of the customer. And we have to remember, and when you're talking to the finance person, it's not just this. This and this bring real value. They bring real value. Marty enjoys his beer more when he gets to drink it in his bar, when he knows what the brand is, and he knows. And you say, well, it doesn't taste any different. Guess what? It really does taste different. They've done pretty, I'll say scientific, but they've done tests. When you taste something, there's actually 2 inputs to the part of your brain tasting something. One comes from your tongue, the other comes from your brain. So when you taste something and you know the brand and you think you know what it tastes like, that part of your memory in your brain is feeding in what it should taste like, and your actual taste buds are feeding it, and the 2 gets merged for the real taste. So it isn't like it doesn't taste the same if I know the brand. It actually can taste differently. Your perception of the taste will be different if you know the brand. So it actually can make it a more enjoyable experience. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about brands, relationships, and offerings. What is brand equity? It's the assets and liabilities linked to a brand, its name, its symbol, that add to or subtract. Come to find out, Walmart their brand is negative. People will pay extra money not to have to shop at Walmart. When they walk out of a Walmart store and they have something in a Walmart bag and they get another bag at another store, they always put the Walmart bag inside the other bag. Never vice versa. They haven't done a great job of managing their brand. So it can be negative. And then if there's some oil spill or something like that, you can obviously get negative liability from that too. Brand works good for large homogeneous groups, but if you're trying to target a whole bunch of segments like Procter & Gamble, that comes tough. But guess what? How many of you seen a Procter & Gamble ad this week? They don't do their company. What they do is they call it a branding technique, which is a house of brands. They do every brand separate. When they launch Swiffer, they start from scratch. Huge expense versus a GE model, which is a branded house. Every product GE offers, they put under the GE brand. The problem is it's hard to jump into other markets. Hard to jump into other markets if everything gets one. So those are two strategies. We call that brand architecture. There's a 500-page book just on how to make those decisions. There's a whole class on that one. We won't go into it anymore, but it can be pretty sophisticated. Hard to adapt. Once it gets locked in, it's in people's mind. So relationship equity, that's a set of relational assets linked to boundary spanning. It's really your people in most cases. It's who you're dealing with. And if you look at service businesses, and right now 85% of the US economy is service. You go back 30, 40 years, it was 40%. Services typically have a delivery aspect to it. The delivery aspect, the people are very important. Starbucks has made a very critical decision that cost them a lot of money but has paid off very well. People have copied it now. They decided not to franchise their stores. Everybody know what I mean by that? They could have said, oh, Starbucks, I could grow way quicker by letting you give me $1 million, I'll give you the little box that'll tell you how to be a Starbucks manager and go start your own Starbucks store. We'll ship the stuff and the coffee beans and you can do your own coffee. But guess what? If Michael had a Starbucks store of his own and he was getting ready to retire, he's got a number of years left, but let's say he was getting ready to retire, would he care about decaying the brand a little bit? Like, you know, I'm supposed to be throwing this coffee away. It's been here for 20 minutes or whatever the time is. I'll keep it for an hour. Who cares? I'll get a little extra money because, and that's what happens to franchises at the end. So they lose control of the experience. And what is Starbucks really selling? Yeah, they have coffee and a whole bunch of gizmos, but they're really selling that experience. And they needed to maintain control of the people in the stores to do it. So it cost a lot of money and they grew a lot slower by doing it that way. But I think it really turned out to be the right decision. In relationships, one of the reasons why relationships matter so much, even the cold-hearted people that say, no, I'm never bothered by a relationship, I do what's right for business. Come to find out about 20 to 30% of your brain, some psychologists, social psychologists said, is there to manage systems to do with our ability to have interpersonal relations. Keeping track of people's names, recognizing people's faces, feeling emotions of gratitude towards other people, empathy towards other people. These are a lot of things that are hardwired in our brain. These are not just socialized by our culture, which also does it, but they're actually, you know, the evolutionary psychologist said there's a reason we have these systems. These systems help us cooperate, build relationships and such. But since about a third, call it, you know, 20 to 30% of your brain is there, we feed it, we carry it around, you know, it's a lot of effort. From an evolutionary standpoint, a lot of effort. A lot of good marketing tactics work by tapping in to those systems in your brain, by making you feel gratitude when you're given something. You just can't really stop yourself. So these really do work, even for people who say, oh, it doesn't matter. Where does it work? It works best for B2B services because there's people involved, and when it's complex selling, when there's risk involved. Because you like a person because that mitigates the risk for you. You can adapt more easy. First thing they teach you in selling is open questions, so I don't commit myself till I know what you want. Then I start giving the sale. Branding can't do that. You have a brand, it comes out, it's everything. So typically this is how you manage your equity stack. Does that equity stack back? Does that make sense how that's building your sustainable competitive advantage? And I want you not to think of it that it goes away at the end of the year, even though that's how the accountants train it. You're building that brand for the long term and the relationship. First, you normally do the brand since it should be direct reflection of the firm's positioning. Firm's positioning is how the whole market's going to think of you. That's your brand. Second is your offering should be consistent with your brand and your positioning strategies. And your relationships typically come into the delivery. So typically this is the natural sequence to think of. You do the first principle that gives you your positioning, and then you can know what you want your brand strategy. Once you know your brand, you can do your offering, and then you go into how to deliver the product and build a relationship. I would argue, at least from a marketing standpoint, the majority of your sustainable competitive advantage are going to come from the dollars you spend on building these BOR equities. And I want you to think of it as equities. You're building an asset. You're building an asset. And these assets typically lie in the customer's mind. I mean, that's where they're kind of residing. And what do you do to do it? These are things you do. You spend money on advertising, R&D, and salespeople. So that kind of ends 3. And I'm going to kind of do a little overview. So what are the inputs? Now we're starting to get, the input of 3 is the outputs of 1 and 2. So that's why this kind of comes third. First, your positioning statements. First, for what you want to be seen in the overall market, which came from the first principle. Then, for your own customers, how you want to be seen or thought of for early customers, middle, and late. And there's nothing magic about 3. It's just a good place to start. Obviously, the more you divide it up, the more it would be more accurate, but it gets more complex. The AIR strategies, we didn't talk a lot about that. Those are the tactics that you think are going to work best for acquisition, expansion, and retention. For instance, I didn't talk about, let me give you one example. How many know the company Vanguard, mutual funds? Okay, a huge company, really one of the biggest in the world. They kind of invented no-load index funds in many ways. They, for a long time, didn't advertise their customers. People came that had a certain philosophy of investing. They searched them out. They wanted low cost. They don't trade very often. To be honest, in the financial service industries, their type of customers, Vanguard customers, are the best. The market goes down, they don't all rush out. They say, I'm here for the long haul, I'm just buying. So what was their acquisition strategy? Their acquisition saying, this is our value principle, this is our mission, this is who we are, you come to us. They got some new CEOs in and said, man, but we need to move in the next generation and do some advertising. Now, they're smart enough not to advertise for sale or something, but as they start advertising and bringing in people, maybe with a web ad or something, do you think that person is the same type of person I'm going to earn the same money on the person they brought over the last 30 years? No, it isn't, typically. Why? Because they're kind of an idea. You know how to get the worst customer in the world? Put a for sale sign up. This is a customer that only is shopping because you're giving away cheap, and they're willing to switch from their own customer, their own supplier, just for a little sale price. Guess what's going to happen next week? Somebody else is going to have a sale. And if that's your target market, guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to reciprocate with another sale. So you don't want to do it on price. You want to do it on other things. And that's what these are giving you. So that's why these acquisition strategies are important, because you need to make sure you're getting the right customer. And you have to know these trends. We didn't talk about this, but there's customer trends, competitive trends, technology trends. You need to know that backdrop of your business. We're not talking. That's just something you need to kind of know about your industry. All those go in, and you go through, and you look at where is your SCA coming from. Normally, you're going to spend money in these 3 ways: brand, offering, or relationships. There's a fixed budget you're going to spend across those areas to try to build a moat around your business. The thing that's tough, and if people at the end of your thing, I didn't mention this earlier, but the last page of your binder is a loose page. It's a feedback form. And we'd really like to get that back. You don't have to put it has your name and stuff. You can do that if you want, but absolutely don't need to do it if you want to really blister us. Sometimes you feel better if you don't put your name down. You can give input, like what other things here you'd like to see or whatever, and I'm also very accessible by email. But each of these, there's a huge basket of information and marketing on branding and relationship and offering that you can spend a lot on. We didn't go into that depth. But I want to make sure you're thinking about those are the levers you're pulling. Here's some analysis that work. What do you get as an output? The first is you should have a very clear picture, your firm, how are you competing? What is your moat around your business? What is your sustainable competitive advantage? What do you think UW's sustainable competitive advantage? One is our geographic location. We kind of own a certain geography, a little bit monopoly there. You look at Boston, Chicago, it's a lot tougher. A lot of good schools in a very close proximity. Another thing is we have a very good brand. It takes many, many years to build that brand. And a lot of it might be with your families and your family's family. Come to find out, 70% of the probability of what you're going to use for toothpaste is what brand you use when you're 16 years old. So a lot of things you get locked in early and go on. If you're a Husky since you were like this high, You know, it's hard to become a cougar, right? I mean, God, no. Got to take at least one cougar shot there. So you want to know what is your moat? You got to know that. You got to know now and in the future. You look at companies like Microsoft. They have a moat. They have this product. I mean, I know how Excel works. I don't want to have to learn a new word process, a new spreadsheet. I know that. That's a big moat, that learning. But a lot of these now are becoming free on the internet. So you can get an Office package. So my daughter, they use a system that's free. She's all used to those buttons. So wow, what happens when she gets older? I don't know that she's going to run out and buy Office. So even companies that you think have a pretty good moat has to think, what is my future SCA going to be? And some have to make big investments for the future on that. And then out of this, you come out with your strategies, your brand strategy, your product development, your innovation strategy, your relationship strategy. How will you do it? This says what you want it to be. This is how you do it. What is your brand architecture? Procter & Gamble can own 80% of the shelf for laundry soap because of their brand of house of brand strategy. Because they can have all those brands. If they were a branded house, they couldn't do that. If everything said P&G, no way you could walk there and say, there's 40 feet of laundry soap, it's all P&G. I want to see different brands. It would have opened up for other companies.